On this feast day of St. Victor and St. Corona, we take a look at the latter, who is gaining new attention, of course, as the world battles the COVID-19 pandemic. Joining me now on Skype, of course, to help us do that is Father Richard Pagano, pastor of St. John Paul II Church in Jacksonville, Florida, and co-host of the Catholic talk show, Father Richard. Welcome, sir. Good to see you.
Owen, thank you so much. I'm happy to be with you.
Yeah, everybody's doing the Skype thing these days. I think it might stay like this permanently if, it seems to be the new thing, right?
Well, I watch all of those viral videos online where there's, somebody creeping in the back of the frame or, kids running into like an official talk on the economy. And right. I think it's hilarious.
There are some embarrassing moments out there, but hopefully none tonight. I don't think there's any cats behind me, so we're okay.
Well, who knows what's going to happen, Owen? I don't know.
True. Let's get right to it. St. Corona is receiving a lot of attention now because of the coronavirus pandemic, of course. Who was she? What do we know about her life?
So I think, one of the things is misnomer, right? So I think nominally, because of her name, Corona, I think there was an immediate association. There's been a lot of conversation online whether Saint Corona is actually, the one really tied to pandemics, epidemics, but she certainly was the most viral. So back in early March, her name and her patronage was being passed around by a lot of different circles online. So that's where I saw it. And both St. Corona and St. Victor come, there's a lot of legends surrounding their history.
Yeah, they're thought of together, right? So what do we know about that?
So St. Victor was held up to be a Roman soldier, and St. Corona was, a basically almost like he was a brother-in-law to St. Corona, and he was being persecuted, and ultimately he was being violently, attacked by that government at that time under Diocletian, and being persecuted for his faith. His eyes were gouged out, and ultimately he was beheaded. But while he was undergoing the torturous pains of martyrdom, St. Corona was there as a bystander, supporting him, calling out to him, encouraging him, which ultimately led to her interrogation and then ultimately her death. She was tied to palm trees that were bent over and then essentially graphically, very, very barbarically ripped apart, which is really under Diocletian's persecutions. There's some of the most barbaric martyrdoms in the history of the church.
So she's often referred to as the patroness of pandemics. Is that right or not?
So of recent history, she is, most certainly for the coronavirus. And again, I think it's all because of the name. But, these devotions that start up all over the world really relate to, the popular piety of the people of God searching for assistance and searching for help. And isn't it true that we lean into the people who are the best examples in a community of faith and prayer and virtue and that type of resilience that only the faith can produce, that they never turn to hopelessness, they never turn to darkness, but they ever turn to light, and they live out that virtue so beautifully. I think that's why over the years and over the centuries, saints are turned to for any type of need. And certainly we have a lot of needs right now in the world and a lot of hopelessness. So, the fact that St. Corona is getting a lot of traction in prayer, I certainly have been praying to her from the get-go, and she's been showing her hand, especially even today in my own personal life, like almost that silver lining that gives you that sense of hope and drive that, hey, we're not alone in this. And the saints are with us, and they're turning our attention to Christ that is going to get us through and walk with us through life, no matter how difficult it may get.
We've got about a minute left. Who are some of the other patron saints we look to during these tough times, plagues, pandemics, etc.?
So St. Aloysius Gonzaga is a go-to.
I'm writing all these down, too. I'm writing all these down. Keep going. Because I'm praying.
St. Roch is also a very, very interesting saint to turn to. He's got a fascinating story behind him. A couple there without a doubt. But I think probably St. Roch is one of the most established saints in the history of the church as it relates to pandemics and epidemics, for sure.
Well, that's great to know. We really got to, prayer helps, right? It helps you internally, spiritually, physically, mentally, so many different ways. We appreciate you coming on, sir. We are going to beat this. I know I said it earlier in the show, we're going to beat this thing. Prayer is going to help, put us in control and in charge. God's in charge, right?
The saints have encountered so many more difficult times throughout the history of the church. lean into the, what they were able to overcome, and through prayer and through our solidarity and rooted in the spirit of Christ, we're going to be able to get through everything we may face. This and so much more.
Absolutely. Father Richard, great talking to you. We'll see you on YouTube, huh?
God bless. Yeah.
All right.